Okay, so thank you all for joining. Again, this is the webinar on the Climate Critical Workforce Training, Equipment, and Infrastructure Grants from Mass PEC. This webinar is being recorded, so we're going to ask everyone to self-mute themselves. If you're willing to do so, please put your name, your organization, and your contact information in the chat, and we will add your name to our spreadsheet list of interested partners. And that list will be shared on the website as well of the RFP. So we'll get started. Onto the agenda, please, of the slide. And as we bring that up, we'll do our introductions. So I'm Edward Shea. I'm the Program Director for Adult Training and MWB Support. I will pass it to, I see Ben's unmuted, so I'll pass it to Ben.
Thank you, Edward. Ben Christensen, Program Manager, Workforce Equity Team here at Mass CEC, and I'll pass it to Anitra.
Hi, everyone. Anitra Ford, Program Manager for the Workforce Equity Team here at Mass CEC as well, and I'll pass it to Heather.
You're muted, Heather.
Oh, sorry. Hi, my name is Heather Mosniak, and I'm also a Program Manager on the Workforce Equity Team, and I'll pass it to Bethany.
Oh my God.
Hi, I'm Bethany. I'm a Workforce Environmental Justice Fellow. I'll pass it to the other fellow, Dylan. Hi, I'm Dylan Lanzadesio, and I'm the other Workforce and Environmental Justice Fellow, and I'll pass it to Camilla.
Hi, everyone. I'm Camilla Bacolod, and I'm the Program Coordinator for the Workforce Equity Programs.
Okay, so moving on. On the screen, you see the agenda for today. We will have a quick overview about the funding itself, where the funding sources come from and sort of our overarching goals. And then we will have a period in the middle where there will be opportunity to ask some questions. We ask that you put your questions in the chat, and we will address the most relevant ones during that section. And then we'll move on and go through the actual application process and scoring process itself with, again, another Q&A section at the tail end. So if you don't have a question up front, there's another chance to do it. If you have concept questions about your programs themselves, we advise you to come to our open office hours, because during those times, we don't record the meeting, which allows everyone to speak a little bit more freely, and we can give you direct advice about program design. So moving on to the next slide, please. Okay, so Mass CEC, we're a quasi-governmental agency in Massachusetts, and our focus areas are on net zero grid, which is solar and microgrid, high performance buildings, which includes retrofitting, weatherization, and electrification of the buildings in Massachusetts, offshore wind, and transportation, which includes both electric vehicles and e-bikes and the infrastructure that supports those vehicles. If you want more information about the sectors themselves, page 7 of the RFP will provide more info. Next slide, please. So while you're at the Climate Critical RFP webinar, we do still encourage you to consider supporting equity populations, because while this funding source does not require it, Mass CEC does have the overarching goal as an agency to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in the clean energy sector as we grow it. So next slide, please.
Who doesn't?
Thanks, Marty. So here's an example of some of the priority occupations that Mass CEC is focused on. This is not an exhaustive list. In fact, if you want to see a full listing, I would suggest you go to the front page of the Mass CEC website, where there is a workforce needs assessment, which has a list of priority occupations. So here, real quick, I want to make a couple call outs. Obviously, some of the highest needs are electricians at the moment, which, since they're cross sort of projects, both transportation, buildings, offshore wind, they all need electricians. In the state of Massachusetts, solar installers have to be licensed electricians. In addition to that, obviously customer service reps, I want to call that out because we're not only focused on, the trade or technical positions, we're looking at the ancillary jobs, which are important to supporting those businesses in the clean energy sector. Moving on to the next slide. So I'll hand this off to, I believe, Ben.
Thank you, Edward. So this slide is show you all of our current open RFPs that we have in the workforce development team at Mass CEC. On the right in the blue boxes are our priority population open solicitations, including our equity workforce training equipment and infrastructure, our rolling equity planning and capacity grants, and our MWE support. If you like additional information on those, please utilize the QR codes. Today we'll be talking about the green box on the left, which is our climate critical workforce training equipment and infrastructure. This does not need to serve priority populations directly, but it is encouraged, but it is designed for mass residents as a whole, and also to support and upskill incumbent workers in the clean energy space. The total amount is up to $800,000 in available funding to support mass residents with career pathway training or incumbent workers with upskilling in the clean energy space, as well as an ARPA fund strand for equipment and infrastructure upgrade to support training. This will go into more detail, but it does require a match depending on which type of organization you are. Next slide, please. So the funds for this RFP are coming from the FY24 state budget. $15 million was set aside for FY24 to the Clean Energy Investment Fund. So this money is only available for this fiscal year, but it'll allow us to enable training opportunities for all mass residents. Priority populations are not required, but are encouraged to be served under this RFP. And the funds do not expire at the end of the fiscal year, but they need to be awarded by the end of this fiscal year. Next slide, please. The additional funding stream is a federal funding stream. The American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 is providing the equipment and infrastructure funding for this solicitation. Awardees receiving ARPA funds will be required to meet additional terms and conditions pursuant to ARPA and the federal government. There is a contract form aside from our contract form that would need to be completed for this strand if you apply. There is a match required. So 1-to-1 for private entities. There's a 25% match if you are a public entity. And funds must be expended prior to December 31st, 2026. So we expect that all awarded projects spend down their funds by the end of calendar year 25, so that then you can report out. Next slide, please. So who's eligible to apply? The following types of entities are eligible to serve as the lead applicant. So CBOs, educational institutions, college universities, community colleges, CTI programs, for-profit entities, workforce development or training organizations, or the Mass Hire Workforce Boards and Career Centers. We are agnostic on who a lead applicant is, but just be aware that whoever the lead applicant is in your partnership group, there would be the point person for all kind of shepherding the contracting phase, and then also invoicing and just overall administration and oversight. The lead applicant must be Massachusetts based or have staffing here in the Commonwealth. They must be in good standing with the Commonwealth and be able to produce a certificate of good standing. Proposed project must be separate and distinct from other projects that were previously funded by Mass CEC. And you must be able to disclose any conflicts of interest. Further details can be found on page 9 of the RFP. Next slide, please. So this is kind of visual representation of what an example would look like of a successful partnership. So the lead applicant could be any of these 5 groups, but they would be the one overseeing all of the partners in the consortium. So we definitely encourage partnerships. We look strongly upon them, lean on your strengths, and bring in partners who can fill in gaps that maybe you do not have the expertise or are able to provide wraparound or hard skill training. So these are just some examples of who might be in your network that you could look to partner. So social service CBOs, workforce development nonprofits that can do the workforce readiness, recruitment assessments, placement support. Community college could do the hard skills, technical trainings, or provide remedial ESOL. Employer partners can do the workforce readiness or placement support. and then use career centers for recruitment, assessment, and placement. Next slide, please. So we'll pause here for any question and answer. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll give that a moment.
No questions. Nope, no questions.
Great. So if there's no questions. We'll move along to the next slide, and I will pass it off to Camilla.
Oh, it looks like there is a question that is in the chat. So is there a limit to the size an individual entity might apply for? Yeah, so it do have a maximum funding of up to $800,000 per applicant. So that is the limit that an entity can apply for. Okay, it's 800,000. Okay, you're welcome. And if any of you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll have another Q&A session later on. So I will discuss the general application process. So next slide, please. So the general application process would be to review the RFP and all the forms and attachments to make sure that you understand the opportunity and the different requirements that we're looking for in the applications. And we also advise all of our applicants to attend the informational webinars as you are doing right now and use other informational resources that are offered. As mentioned, we have a workforce needs assessment that is a great resource on like the workforce landscape in Massachusetts, and that assessment also includes relevant data that might inform your application process. And we also have open office hours where you can discuss with our team members about any questions you might have, or just to discuss your potential ideas for your proposed program. If you do have other questions, you can also reach us at rfpworkforce@masscec.com. And those questions will also be posted on our website on our FAQs, so any potential applicant can see those relevant questions. The due date for this grant is May 1st, 2024 to rfpworkforce@masscec.com. So you must submit all of the required attachments and forms by this due date to this email address. So next slide, please. The application packet includes a signature and acceptance form, an application form in a Word that can be submitted in a Word or PDF document, and a budget is also required, and that must be submitted using our budget format that's provided on our website, and in an Excel format. And we also provide sample grant agreements. Please note that there's a different agreements for strand A and B, and then there's an additional agreement for strand C for the ARPA funding, since the federal funding has a different set of reporting requirements. So there's a separate agreement for that. So all of the application materials are found on our website. If you have any issues accessing the materials for some reason on our website, also feel free to reach us at rfpworkforce@masscec.com. And for the application, at least 2 memorandums of understanding or letters of support from partners must be submitted attached to the application form or as separate documents. And we also want to note that additional attachments will not be considered during the review and scoring process to ensure an equitable review process. Next slide, please. So this table includes the general timeline. So we're accepting questions ongoing through April 5th, 2024, and that will be updated on the website. Again, we have pre-application office hours. You can find the links on that on our website as well. The proposals are due May 1st, and there will be requests for interviews of applicants as needed after the application submission, and we hope to notify awardees by June 2024. We are open to ideas that promote diverse pipelines to these climate critical occupations. So if you make a compelling case as to how a certain training program will increase workers with the in-demand skills that we need in Massachusetts, we are open to hearing those ideas. And again, you can attend office hours to bounce off your ideas with one of our team members, or you can reach us at rpworkforce@massez.com if you have, initial questions about your program ideas. So this is the selection criteria that we will use to evaluate applications. So all of the strand applications will be reviewed based upon these selection criteria, which includes the experience and qualifications of the lead applicant and partners, the occupations and populations that you're targeting. We also are looking for if the applicant is maximizing employer engagement and using their input throughout the program development and implementation process. We're also looking for strong outcomes and programs that signals sustainability with a reasonable budget and leveraging resources so the program can be sustained beyond this grant. And for diversity of approaches, we're looking for programs with diversity in occupations, geography, and general unique approach to the training program. We do have different strands for this RFP. So strand A is for career pathway training, strand B is for climate critical upskilling, and strand C is for equipment and infrastructure. And these different strands have different award ranges and timeline. So my colleagues will speak more about these different strands in more detail in this presentation. So now I will hand it off to Heather to speak more about Strand A.
Thanks, Camilla. We can go to the next slide. Strand A of this RFP is for the career pathway training leading to employment in climate critical occupations. Applicants can apply for 1 to 2 year grants ranging from $100,000 to $800,000, as Camilla already mentioned. Matches aren't a requirement for this strand, but are always encouraged. Applicants in this strand should have a strong training plan that covers both job skills and career readiness and sets up the participants for long-term success. So whenever possible, programs should provide direct pathways to industry recognized credentials or licenses. We also want to emphasize that wraparound support services, case management, should continue throughout the program from intake through the job placement, both to meet the needs of your training participants and promote retention success. Tied to these successes, you'll note here that applicants are required to track metrics for 1 year post-project completion. Go to the next slide. Camilla just discussed the selection criteria for all applications, but you'll also find additional criteria for Strand A on page 16 of the RFP, specifically around program design. Again, a strong, comprehensive training plan should take into consideration and be designed to meet both the needs of the employers, your employer partners, and the training participants. Want to highlight again that successful programs will prioritize case management that tailors support services individually to each participant. We can go to the next slide. Under selection criteria, Camilla also mentioned that applicants should propose strong outcomes. So what does that look like? For Strand A, strong proposed outcomes for successful applications will include, for example, specific milestones for your training participants. For example, attainment of a credential or license, case management resulting in the removal of specific barriers, and placement into a clean energy occupation. Within a comprehensive job placement strategy, we want to know your proposed outcomes for program completion, participant placement in jobs, and retention of those participants in the target occupation. Meeting those outcomes is, we expect, will require regular planned engagement with your partners, including your employers. And you can see this visually a little bit better on the next slide. This slide is an example of a traditional program pipeline, but you'll see that employer engagement begins before the recruitment of participants, and support services for the participants are ongoing from intake through job placement and post-job placement. We want to note that, of course, these different roles could be filled by the applicant partners and not just the lead applicant. For example, CBOs, community-based organizations, community colleges, employers, and the other partners you've identified. But we thought this was useful to see how that engagement continues throughout the project. So this is for specifically Strand A. We can move on to the next slide, and I'm going to hand it off to Anitra.
Thanks, Heather. Next slide, please. So Strand B is climate critical upskilling for incumbent workers. The range for this award is similar to Strand A, being $100,000 to cap out at $800,000. It is similarly a 1 to 2 year award with an additional year of tracking metrics for participants. Again, there is no match required, highly encouraged though. And for this particular strand, we're looking to see proposals that offer to create new or expand career advancement programming and upskilling, as well as establish and grow wraparound and retention services for its participants. Next slide. The additional criteria for Strand B is that we're traditionally looking for a very detailed training plan that with clear benefits to the incumbent workers. Whenever relevant, the training program offers industry recognized certifications or credentials. The program design benefits participant skill development without proposing any cost to the worker. So we are seeing that this program covers all the costs. And the proposal includes a clear and imminent opportunity for workers to utilize these skills developed in their training. More information on these additional selection criteria can be found on page 17. Next slide. For outcomes in Strand B, we're looking for milestones that indicate success in completion of the incumbent worker training. That includes skill gain, a promotion, wage increase, or increase in clean energy work overall. Descriptions of employers' involvement in the training program as it pertains to recruitment and employee supports. And last but not least, letters of support or memorandums of understanding from at least 2 partners that offer off-ramp opportunities. Next slide. And now I am going to pass it back to Ben to explain Strand C.
Mitra. So Strand C is our equipment and infrastructure to support climate critical training strand. This is our ARPA funded strand. The award range is $50,000 to $750,000. The award duration is from 1 year to 18 months. There is a match requirement. It's a dollar-to-dollar match for private entities. 25% of the total ask is required for public entities. So the goal of this strand is to secure modern equipment and infrastructure resources for your climate critical workforce training programming. It will allow you to purchase and install specialized equipment and infrastructure. These funds are coming again from the ARPA fund of 2021. So it's again subject to federal reporting requirements. There's some additional forms and contracting requirements that we would need to go through when we get to that stage. Strand C contracts will largely end by December 31st, 2025, so that final reporting can be completed by end of calendar year 2026. Next slide, please. In the application, you'll see that Strand C does have additional selection criteria called out. So we are focused on gleaning from you what the program impact on training will be with this infrastructure and equipment upgrade. So be prepared to explain how the equipment will increase availability and quality of climate critical occupation training, how the equipment will increase the number of students able to participate, and how it will also lead to addition or improvement of climate critical skills supported by your existing training programs. All of this information can be found on page 17 of the RFP. Next slide, please. So for Strand C, with the outcomes, successful applications will include what your vision is of this equipment and infrastructure, a description of how capacity building supported by equipment and infrastructure funding, what that will look like, the steps to select, procure, and integrate new capacity, and taking into account future maintenance and upkeep, and what the overall impact of the equipment and infrastructure will be, the descriptions of how the equipment and infrastructure will improve your program, how it will work with your existing training curriculum and opportunities, and also identifying any programmatic gaps and needs that will be addressed by this addition of additional equipment. Next slide, please. So that's what we have for our 3 strands. We will have one more section after this for some Q&A. So please have some questions ready in the chat. We do have office hours for more detailed questions that you may have about your project, or if you have specific questions about the application process. And these are the dates here. Our next one will be next Tuesday on the 19th at 11 a.m. There's a link to register on our funding landing page for the climate critical solicitation on our website. So you can register there to participate. These are drop in, drop out. So feel free to come in. Once your question is asked, you're free to leave. But if you want to stay to see who else is joining that day to maybe find additional partnerships to grow our ecosystem, that is encouraged. We do want to encourage networking. So if you have not done so or came in late, please drop your name, organization, and contact information into the chat of this webinar. And if you'd like to stay up to date on other opportunities at Mass CEC, And the workforce team, please sign up for our partnership list by sending your contact info to workforce@masscec.com. And next slide, please. And we'll pause here for any Q&A. So it looks like we have a couple questions. Could you say that Strand A is soft skills based, and Strand C is equipment needed to deliver it? Yes. So Strand C would be for larger equipment that would be used long after a single cohort. So things that you needed just for a specific training program for a cohort, that would be kind of in the supplies line of a Strand A budget. But the larger infrastructure, labs, training space, or electrical equipment or panel upgrades to support EV chargers, things like that would fall under a Strand C equipment request. What happens to the equipment after the grant period? We hope that the equipment will serve for a long period of time. We would not be reclaiming equipment after the end of the grant period. So what you would use to purchase it once your reporting is complete, there would be no additional requirements. Match is required, 1-to-1 for private entity, 25-to-1 for public. That is correct, yes. So that's just for Strand C. Strand A, Strand B do not have a match requirement, but we do want to see leverage funding. And if you do have other funding streams that can support a program outside of the funding that Mass CEC provides, that's something that we do. So please explain more. So if you are a non-public organization, so not a public school, but you're just a private nonprofit, and you're applying for $700,000 for equipment, then you would need to match that either with dollars or in kind or other funding sources. Can we apply for both Strand A and C? Yes, it is. If you apply for Strand C, you must have a Strand A application. Can the same applicant apply for both Climate Critical Grant and Equity Workforce Training Grant? Yes, that is encouraged as well. We do encourage applying to both of our current training and upskilling RFPs concurrently. If there's no other questions at this time, I will pass it off to Camilla for additional funding opportunities.
Before we get into that, just to put a finer point on sort of the matches, just to clarify, this is for the Climate Critical Grant, we require those matches. However, if you're applying to the Equity Training Grant, we don't have the same match requirements for the ARPA strand. So if you are if you're applying for training under Equity and Climate and ARPA, then you could potentially avoid the match. The other thing that if you look at the RFP, there is space for you to make an argument for no match, but that would of course have to have some significant substantiation. The reasoning behind not providing a match, and again, match can vary in form. If you, for example, are designating extensive staff time to running the training program, which and the install of the equipment, then that could be considered match.
Okay. Moving on to additional funding opportunities. So another opportunity that the Workforce Development Program MASCEC offers is our internship program. So our internship program is now open for the summer session, and this program allows you to hire college students or recent graduates as interns at your company, and then MASCEC can reimburse you for those interns' wages. So companies can get reimbursed up to $18 per hour or up to $8,640 per intern for 12 weeks of an intern's work during the summer. This is a great way for you to potentially hire these interns out of college and familiarize get familiarized with your company. So I really encourage you to look into this program by scanning the QR code. And even if you're not exactly a clean energy company, but you have a clean energy project that you want an intern to work on, you can still be eligible for this program. Another internship program is the Technical Trades Work and Learning Program. Similar to the internship program from the previous slide, you can also get reimbursed up to $8,640 per participant. But this program is for hiring interns from vocational high schools, after dark programs, CTI students, and other participants of MASCEC approved programs are eligible to participate in this. So you can also find more information on that by scanning the QR code. And if you have any questions about any of these programs, you can also reach out to internships@masscec.com. So another opportunity, as we mentioned, we have the Equity Workforce Training Equipment and Infrastructure Grants, which is similar training grant program, but this grant is focused on equity populations, such as individuals from EJ neighborhoods and underserved individuals. So the recording and the slides of that webinar should be up on our website, and it also has a deadline of May 1st, 2024. Another opportunity that we have, it's for support grants for minority and women-owned business enterprises. And this grant is intended to address barriers faced by minority and women-owned businesses in the clean energy sector. And we also added an additional strand to develop a shared approach to increase access to capital for those climate critical MWBEs. We hosted a webinar on this grant yesterday. So it will, the recording and the slides will be up on our website shortly, but there is a deadline of April 12th, 2024 for this grant. Again, if you have any questions, you can reach out to us through this email and we will respond to your question as soon as possible. Okay, thank you all for attending this webinar, and we look forward to hopefully hearing from you in the future via office hours or through email. Okay, thank you everyone.